Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, I thought we'd do our third, I think it's our third, let me close my laptop here, do the do a third episode of a private sale haul from a gentleman that I've bought many DVDs and some Blu-rays off of. He listed a bunch more stuff on Kijiji, so I went through it all and I found 25 DVDs, 7 Blu-rays, and 3 Steelbooks. Um, Out of his collection, I paid like $38. I think it was $38 for all of it. Can't beat that price. Um, I have a bunch more stuff to add to my collection, which is good. So I'm not sure how long this might be a long video. I may break it up into a couple of parts. I'm not sure. We'll see how long my voice lasts out. Uh, see if my voice gets too scratchy or whatever. But enough of the greetings. Let's start doing some of the DVDs. So I figure I'll do the DVDs, then the Blu-rays, then the Steelbooks. All right. So the first is called Always, and it's a Steven Spielberg film that came out in 1989, and it stars Holly Hunter, Richard Dreyfuss, and John Goodman. And this is supposed to be a heck of a film, and it's a remake of a 1943 film called A Guy Named Joe, and it's basically a supernatural film um, about pilots that fly through um, like firefighting pilots that fight, forest fires and stuff, right? So um, Richard Dreyfuss is a like a cocky pilot that ends up dying, and he ends up coming back to teach other pilots as a ghost. He influences them or whatever to make them better pilots, and his uh, his woman is slowly uh, mourning him and gets over him, and then starts getting involved with another pilot. And anyways, it gets intriguing from there. But basically, Richard Dreyfuss plays a ghost throughout this whole film, and it's really an intriguing film. And it's not one of Spielberg's greatest films, but it is a good film. Is there a bad Spielberg film? It's rare. If there is one, I can't think of one just off the top of my head. So, and I'm a Spielberg collector, so every film I come across that I don't have yet, that's a Spielberg film, I'll pick it up, and this was one of them. So it's called Always. Came out in 1989, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Richard Dreyfuss. So that's number one. All right. Number two is John Wayne's first film as a leading star in the film, and it's Raoul Walsh's The Big Trail. Yeah, The Big Trail. All right. So it's a black and white film from 1930. Raoul Walsh is one of the great early directors, American directors. I mean, he was directing films all the way back to like 1914, like World War I times, and he's got a ton of films on his resume. But this is one of his better ones, and uh, no, this is a pre-code film, Western film. All right, so it tells a story of a group of settlers that goes out to the out further west and is led by John Wayne to this the Oregon Valley. I think it's called the Oregon Trail, or was it the Oregon Trail? Yeah, the Oregon Trail in the Pacific Northwest. And they're going to go settle that land, and John Wayne volunteers to lead them there because he's been there before. But his main purpose is to kill the two men that killed his parents. I think was it he killed his parents? I don't know. It's been a long time since I've seen this. Um, So he plays Brett Coleman, a young scout who leads the caravan while seeking vengeance for the death of a friend. Okay, so it wasn't his parents, it was a friend. Courageously, he leads the pioneers through untold dangers, including attacks by Indians, buffalo stampeders, snowstorms, rough terrain, hunger, and so on and so forth. All right, so basically, he's leading uh, this uh, this group of settlers, but his main purpose is because the two guys that killed his friend are have infiltrated into this group of settlers, and he's going to find them and kill them. All right. Anyways, it's a pretty good film and a good introduction to Raoul Walsh's films. And whenever I see a Raoul Walsh film, I pick it up. But he's got so many that there's so many to collect. But I keep an eye out for all of them. I don't know how many I have. I think I have like 6 or 7 of his films now. But I mean, they're in the dozens, right? So anyway, so this is if you like John Wayne, this is his first film as a lead. All right, all right. So that's The Big Trail, 1930 by Raoul Walsh and starring John Wayne. Next up is a film that I've been looking for years, but because it's a Canadian film, it's so hard to find. That's the problem with being Canadian, is that a lot of the films that are Canadian are difficult to find unless they're, Canadian directors directing American films, or, uh, like, let's say you're a fan of Cronenberg, David Cronenberg, you'll be able to find um, his Hollywood films. But if you go back and good luck in trying to find some of his early stuff, you can find it. I mean, his name is popular and known enough that his films are being put out all the time, and the Criterion Collection has a large amount of them. But it took me 2.5, 3 years to find Rabid, and I think I had to buy that one new just to get it right. So, anyways, did I? I may have. I can't remember now. But anyways, but some of his films, his older films, like Rabid or Scanners, but Scanners is a Criterion, so you can't find it in that collection. But try to find it outside that collection. Good luck. Anyway, so Canadian directors are very very hard to find. Canadian films are very hard to find, even when you're in Canada. I mean, you got a better chance to find them in Canada than outside of Canada, but it's a lot easier to find an American film, especially a mainstream popular American film, than it is to find a Canadian film, especially a Canadian indie film. All right. Anyways, but so this film came out, I think it was 1974, and Bob Clark directed. And Bob Clark is one of the bigger directors, Canadian directors. He did A Christmas Story. He did Porky's. What other? Uh, those are the two main ones that people know that he's done. But he's done others, and this is um, one of his more important films, and it's called Black Christmas. And basically, this came out in 1974, and John Carpenter used this for Halloween, was influenced by this to make Halloween. And this is about a slasher. This is basically a slasher film from the 1970s, all right, that predated all the slasher films from the late 70s into the 80s, all the Freddy Kruegers and Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween films, all those films that came out after this one. All right. Now, arguably, probably the first main slasher film would be what? Psycho, right? Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock, where at the Bates Motel, Norman Bates dresses up as his mother and kills people, right? That one probably technically is probably one of the first, if not the first, slasher films. But the main slasher films of the late 70s and early 80s that started with Halloween. Well, Halloween was influenced by this film, and this film was basically a slasher film, but in first person. And that's another unique thing about this film that you don't see, and it spawned on others, but it was the first one that I can recall where you a lot of the film is taken from the killer's eyes, where the camera is the killer's eyes. So it's not like you're a witness to this film, you're actually the killer participating in this film or watching through the killer's eyes, which was a freaky thing, all right? When it came out at that time. Me being, I was a young. I don't think I saw it in '74. I think I saw it in the late '70s, early '80s. Was the first time I saw it. When I saw it, it freaked the hell out of me. Him going around prowling into windows and everything. And basically, it's a precursor to When a Stranger Calls as well, because there's this Montreal like urban legend or whatever about a guy who would call up a babysitter, and turns out that the guy is inside the house or whatever. And that's basically what When a Stranger Calls is about. But that's what the beginning of this film is about as well. A bunch of sorority girls in their sorority houses are being called by, getting prank calls from this guy who ends up, going inside and basically killing most of them, right? So it's a precursor to Halloween, and it's one of the great films. It's a Canadian film directed by Bob Clark, and actually early film of Margot Kidder, if you remember Margot Kidder from all the Superman films of the 80s, right? So the late 70s, early 80s, Superman, Superman 2, are the ones that starred Christopher Reeve, right? So she played Lois Lane in those films, but she was in this film as well. So this you should pick up. It's very important in horror history, and it's one of the great Canadian films. And I'll doubt if you don't like it if you like horror films. And if you are really into horror films, you probably already have this. But it took me a few years to actually find it. Now I got it. All right. Now just let's see if I can find it in Blu-ray. All right. And so that's the third DVD. Next up is another horror film from 1974, and it's called It's Alive, and it's directed by Larry Cohen. All right. So Larry Cohen, um, this is probably his best film, but he started out in like blaxploitation films, if I remember correctly. He wrote some early blaxploitation films, and he also directed some of the later films like Cellular. He directed in the 2000s, and what was that, Phone Booth? Was Phone Booth another one of him? I think it was Phone Booth back in 2002. Yeah, he also directed. But this may be his best film. It's a horror genre film. It's about a woman um, who was taking contraception, but ends up having a baby, getting pregnant after she took this contraception. She stopped taking it because uh, her and her husband wanted to have a baby, and they do have a baby, but this baby comes out to be a horror, like claws and teeth and everything, and it escapes out of her womb, kills all the doctors and nurses that gave birth to it, and then just went in the sewers and went everywhere else, and the police are hunting down for it, and the father is going to look for it, and the mother hides it, and everything else. It's like one freaky film, right? And you have to watch it to believe it or whatever. But yeah, it's a pretty freaky film from the 70s. The 70s were a really good decade for horror, like this one, Black Christmas. Rosemary's Baby, was that? I think that was in the 70s. And the greatest one, in my opinion, the greatest horror film all time was in the 70s, and that's The Exorcist. You also had all the Omen ones about the Devil's Child, The Omen. Those were good too. So the 70s were a really good gothic and horror period of time. If you ever want to delve back into the horror of the 70s, I think you would enjoy it. And this is one of them that you should seek out and find and watch. It's really good. All right. So that's It's Alive. Next up is a Clint Eastwood directed and starred uh, revisionist Western film from 1972, and it is called Joe Kidd. All right. And he plays the typical guy Clint Eastwood does. He's a gunslinger. He's really good with a gun, and so on and so forth. There are others that are better than this, but this is a 70s rather than a 60s film, and it's not bad. I mean, if you like Clint Eastwood as a gunslinger, then you're going to like this film. And it's directed by John Sturges, who I collect as well. He did his two most famous films are The Magnificent Seven and The Great Escape, and this one is good as well. I mean, it's not the good, the bad, and the ugly, all right, but it's a good western. It's not a spaghetti western like the Leone film is, but it's a good film. This is kind of his transition period. Clint Eastwood, I'm talking about, his transition period from the western into cop movies, like all the Dirty Harry films and that kind of thing. So you're kind of getting until Unforgiven. You're kind of getting this. This may be the last one he does before he starts doing all the cop films rather than the westerns. But don't quote me on that. But I think this is one of his last ones, if not his last one, before he started going into the cop films, and then he returns to the western in what, in the 90s, I think it is, with the Unforgiven and Pale Rider. All right. Anyway, so I mean, if you're a Clint Eastwood fan, you're going to pick it up. I love Clint Eastwood. I love his directing and his acting. So Anytime I come across a Clint Eastwood film, I pick it up and add it to my collection. So next up is a 1955 black and white film noir and Stanley Kubrick's second film. All right, so um, it's called Killer's Kiss, and it's one of his early films. So if you want to see him pre, all the great films, 2001, A Space Odyssey, all his 60s and 70s, Clockwork Orange, it's Kubrick. Kubrick, when you argue about English directors, there's Kubrick is always one, and Hitchcock is the other. You fight between the two on who's the greatest, right? I think Hitchcock is, and maybe he's second. And this is a second film, so it's not super difficult to find, but it is a bit hard to find. It's called Killer's Kiss. All right. So next up is a 1976 film starring Jessica Lange and Jeff Bridges, and a really, 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 really big gorilla. It's called King Kong. All right. And this one is the 70s King Kong, and this is the King Kong that I watched first. All right, it wasn't the 1933 King Kong and those ones that came before. This was the first King Kong that I watched, so I kind of like this. And um, the scene where King Kong kind of with his finger starts taking down Jessica Lange's a dress, her dress, will always be burned in my head because it's the first time I ever saw something like that on film where you get a flash of boobs or whatever, right? I don't know if you actually see her boobs or not. I can't remember because it's been like 30 years since I've seen this, right? But I think so. I think you get a split second. What's funny is that's the only time you ever see Jessica Lange in any type of, I mean, that I can recall, anyways, any type of, you know, um, damsel in distress or sexual type of role is in this one. All the rest of them, she seems to be playing like a very dressed female, uh, you know, more female directed films after this. But this one, I think it might have been her first, but it put her on the map. Let's put it that way. And it was my introduction to King Kong. So when I saw it in the guy's collection and I didn't have it, well, it's mine. All right. So I'm going to watch it again because I haven't seen it in a long time. All right. So the next up is one of Scorsese's non-gangster films, but still starring Robert De Niro, but it also stars Jerry Lewis, and it's called The King of Comedy, and it came out in 1982. All right, and this is basically about a stand-up comedian who's Robert De Niro, um, trying to get it big, and Jerry Lewis is a, a big-time comedian and talk show host, and Robert De Niro introduced himself to the guy when he sees jumps into a cab or whatever, or a car. I can't remember if it was a cab or not, and talks himself up and everything. Anyways, it's a pretty spooky film because Robert De Niro is not all there. All right, and he's trying to become a successful comic. Anyways, it gets it. You think it's a comedy, but it isn't a comedy. All right, it's called The King of Comedy, but it isn't really comedy. It has Jerry Lewis in it, but Jerry Lewis is not. I mean, it's not as much a comedy as it is a bit of a psychological thriller type of thing where, he ends up Jerry Lewis, I mean, ends up getting kidnapped and other stuff in it. So it's got that Scorsese signature to it, but it's out of the usual norm that Scorsese makes films, and so it didn't actually do very well when it came out, but it's a Scorsese film, and you can't go wrong with a Scorsese film, so I added it to my collection. Next up after that is Office Christmas Party, and I saw this and I laughed, but it was a while back, um, and I like Jason Bateman, so um, I've been watching Jason Bateman since. Remember the comedy with Ricky Schroeder, the sitcom on television? Was it ABC, NBC? It might have been NBC. Called Silver Spoons. Well, that's where I came in contact with Bateman first, and been watching him ever since. Right. Um, so this is a comedy. It's pretty funny. I mean, it's not going to win any awards or anything, but I enjoyed it, so I picked it up. It's not from a director that I usually collect, so it'll be in my one-off section of my collection. but I'm probably going to watch it again just in case and say, is it worth the inch or two on the shelf since I have so little space that I need to protect the space, but we'll see. And next up is a brand new, unopened version of I Killed My Mother, which is a film by Xavier Dolan. Now, Xavier Dolan, in this film, he stars, but he also directs, and he's like maybe 23, 24 years old in this film. Anyways, it's a film about his relationship to his mother and that argument and fighting that happens between teenagers and their parents, right? But this is just his mother. And does he actually kill his mother in this film? I'm not sure because I haven't seen it yet. But it's a Canadian film directed by now Xavier Dolan has a good reputation. He's done like I think 5 more films after this one, but trying to find them is impossible. I mean, I look and I haven't found any of them. So I found this one, and it's actually new. The guy who ended up selling this never even opened it. So, which is kind of interesting. So this is a French language film. All right. Um, uh, Xavier is a Quebecois. He's a francophone, right? And this is an actual film. So it's a J'ai tué ma mère, or I killed my mother in English. So it won a bunch of awards, like 4 at the Cannes Film Festival and everything. So it's supposed to be pretty good, but I haven't seen it. But it's a Canadian film, and when you come across a Canadian film that has a good reputation, you pick it up, right? So I mean, next up is a 1990 film, the first film of the 90s by Woody Allen. It's called Alice, and this film is a romantic comedy. And whenever I watch Woody Allen, his 70s stuff is the best, all right? And then where almost everything that he does in the 70s is just really, really good, it's kind of hit and miss once you pass the 80s, get into the 80s and past the 80s. But this one is definitely a hit, all right? You get some that are good, like Crimes and Misdemeanors is another good one, but then you miss. So this one is based actually on a Fellini film. What was that called? A Fellini film. It was called um, Juliet of the Spirits. Juliet of the Spirits, and it came out. I'm not sure when it came out, but basically, this film is about Mia Farrow, who's married, has been married for a long period of time, and she ends up accidentally or um, bumping into a jazz musician played by Joe Magnetta. Magnetta, that's hard to pronounce his name as well. Ignorant intellectual. Who's a jazz player in this film, and there's a kind of a spark there, eh? But she doesn't cheat on her husband. She's a good Catholic girl, but then later on, there's a magical element to this film where there's a Chinese Eastern medicine guy that gives her all these powders and potions, right? And his name is K.A. Luke, and he plays Dr. Yang. And so one of the potions that he gives her makes her invisible, and she ends up, I think, following, if I remember correctly, because I haven't seen this in a long time, following her husband and sees him in an embrace with another woman and realizes that he's been cheating on her all this time. So it relieves a lot of the guilt for her to wanting to get involved with the Joe Magnetta guy, that jazz guy, right? So they end up getting involved, and uh, the Chinese medicine guy keeps giving her these different potions, and it's kind of reminiscent of A Midsummer Night's Dream. If you've ever seen that in the theater, the Shakespeare play, or read it, you have Puck, this fairy that goes around with all these different couples sprinkling fairy dust on them, and what the fairy dust does is the next person that they meet, they fall in love with automatically. Well, there's kind of elements of that in this, which makes it humorous. All right, so it's a romantic comedy, but it's a Woody Allen romantic comedy, and when he hits really well, and he really hit with this Alice. All right, and so when I didn't have it in my collection yet, so I picked it up. I collect Woody Allen films, so that'll be in my collection as well. Next up is another Clint Eastwood film from 2014 called Jersey Boys, and this is about what the Four Seasons, the singing group, the Four Seasons, with Frankie Valli. That time, I think back in the 50s, 40s and 50s and 60s. The group that did Big Girls Don't Cry. Big. Am I allowed to sing, or am I doing a copyright infringement? Anyway, so The reason why I picked it up is, you know, like Woody Allen, Clint Eastwood. It seems the studios like Clint Eastwood, so he directs a ton of films. He'll just go on the set and direct a film for you know for one of the studios because they asked them to, right? So it's not like he's invested in some of these films. He just does it because he's a director as well as an actor, and the ones that he directs where he's not in, I think he has less connection to, and some of those films can be like hit and miss. They're all pretty good, right? I mean, like Firefox, not so much. And there is an occasional one that is like, borderline, but most of the films that Clint Eastwood directs are good. So this one is probably good, but probably not one of his better ones. When did this come out? Yeah, 2014. So, but it's a Clint Eastwood film. I collect him as a director, so I'm going to add that to my collection. Next up is another Canadian film, and it's called New Waterford Girl. And New Waterford is in Nova Scotia, and this is about a girl who's kind of bored. She wants to get out of rural life in Nova Scotia, but this American family moves in next door who has a flamboyant daughter, and they kind of hit it off and become friends. And it's like kind of coming of age friendship between two girls um, type of film, and it's directed by Alan Moyle, all right, who did before this he did two American films before he directed an actual Canadian film, and he is a Canadian director. All right, so his name is Alan Moyle. If you remember, he did that Christian Slater film, Pump Up the Volume, and he also did, what else did he do? Empire Records. So those are the two main films, American films that he's done, Empire Records and Pump Up the Volume. But this one is more of a girl led story, and so because he's Canadian and I like Pump Up the Volume, I picked it up. See how it is. All right. Next up is a Brian De Palma film, and John Lithgow is extremely good in this film. All right. Most people know him for A Third Rock from the Sun, that comedy where he plays an alien living on Earth and pretending to be a professor. Well, he is a professor on Earth, but he's actually an alien in secret. But in this one, he does not play a funny guy. He does not play a good guy. He plays a guy with multiple personalities, and he's freaky as hell. All right, and it's a Brian De Palma film, and it's called Raising Cain, and it's one of the better ones from the 1990s. Um, De Palma had better films than this, but this one for that '90s type of thriller, '90s type of it has that Hitchcock element to it as well, that Brian De Palma is famous for because Hitchcock was one of his uh, favorite directors, and he looked on Hitchcock as a mentor kind of thing. His films really influenced Brian De Palma, so this one it's got Hitchcock infused in it. And if you like Hitchcock and you like Brian De Palma, especially like a film like Body Double, that kind of film, Body Double. If you've seen it, if you haven't, go out and find it and see it. It's an extremely good film. Melanie Griffith, one of her first roles, is in that film. Anyway, so it's called Raising Cain, and John Lithgow does an amazing job in that film. All right. So next up is an early film. All right, and this one's from 1944, black and white film. All right, and it's called The Razor's Edge, and it stars Tyrone Power, Gene Tierney, John Payne, and Ann Baxter. And this is directed by Edward Golding, who's done. Um, I don't really collect Golding. I don't think as a director. He doesn't strike my mind, anyways. But this is part of the Fox Studio Classics. All right, so they're numbered on the spine, so they're fun to collect. I think there's 40 of them, but it's called The Razor's Edge, and probably his greatest film, Golding's greatest film, I mean, is one of the great Fox uh, film noir uh, movies called Nightmare Alley. So I like Nightmare Alley. This one's based on a W. Somerset Maugham book. So it would be perfect for a book to a movie comparison, see which one's better. But I haven't read the Razor's Edge by Ma, so I can't really do that comparison. But anyway, so it's part of the Fox Studio Classics, and I have a number of these. So I saw that this was number 30, and for $1, I think it was $1 or less that I picked it up for. Figured I'd pick it up and watch it, and add it to that collection. All right. Next up is 2016's A Monster Calls, and this is supposed to be a really good film. But if you ever watched Guardians of the Galaxy, you know Root. Well, this has a very huge root in it, right? But who does the voice for him? Liam Neeson does the voice. So it's about a boy who ends up becoming friends with a huge tree. All right, and there's a storyline to it where the tree visits him and tells him three stories, but on the condition that after the third story, the next time they meet, the boy has to tell him a story. But it's it's an animated film. It has animation in it and live action, and it's a very touching film. So I don't want to wreck it for you because talking about it will wreck it. You know, some films you can talk about it without spoiling it. Other films you can't, and this is the one that you can't really talk about without spoiling because it's basically a storyteller's film. All right, um, and if you tell the stories to tell what the film is about, then you're kind of ruining the film. So I'll just tell you that it's a really good film. Um, it came out in 2016. It was directed by J.A. Bayona. All right, and he's the guy that did that Jurassic Park Fallen Kingdom film. It's the only one I know from him. That was like the fifth film in the franchise, in the Jurassic Park franchise. He did that, but then he did this one, and this one is much, much better. All right. So if you ever get a chance to find this film, Monster Calls, pick it up. It's a good film. All right. So, all right. Next up, we're going to go back to 1939 and George Cukor. All right. And he directed this, and this must have been an interesting directing experience for Cukor. Cukor? Is that how you say his name? George Cukor? Anyways, he was big in the 40s, 50s, 30s. He did some good film noir as well. But this film is all about, it's kind of like a criticism of, upper class society life of women. They're all married to rich husbands and they have a lot of time on their hands and they get into the gossip and all that kind of thing, right? So, and what this film is most famous for is that the cast in this film strictly female. There is no males in this cast at all. It's all women, and it was called The Women. All right, and it was one of Joan Crawford's best films. All right, so Joan Crawford, a big name back then, and but it's basically a scathing, what do they call it? A scathing criticism of high society life, right? Where rich women have too much time on their hands. But basically, if you want to watch a film that has no male characters in it at all, and it's all female characters, try this one out. See what you think. All right. After that one is another new film, still in its plastic, and it's called Silkwood, and it's one of Meryl Streep's best films. Now she did this film right after Sophie's Choice, and Sophie's Choice was such a brutal film. I mean, you leave that film emotionally exhausted, and then she does this film, which is about her basically working at a nuclear power plant, and, and she begins to be outspoken and complaining about the working conditions at this nuclear power plant. And basically, it's based on a true story, but they don't know exactly what happened, so there's kind of like speculation in the film. But basically, she gets poisoned by the company because she doesn't keep her mouth shut. And anyways, it's an extremely good film. And it also stars Cher. And uh, when did it come out? 83. And it stars Kurt Russell in a more serious role. He's not playing that Joker type of guy that he plays in a lot of the John Carpenter films. He's like serious. He plays like Meryl Streep's boyfriend or husband. Anyways, so this is I haven't seen this film, um, I heard about it, and all you hear is good stuff about this film, like the last 40 years or whatever. Um, but I just never came around and found it. Now I found it. I'll open it and I'll watch it. But it, but I think this might be a German edition of it because it has Euro video on the front of it, and it's got that type of stamp on it, and the back is is in German. So hopefully I can watch it on my Blu-ray player. All right, next up is a Ralph Bakshi film, and Ralph Bakshi is famous for. Remember before? Remember the day before? In the days before Peter Jackson did the Lord of the Rings, right? That trilogy. There was a cartoon version of that trilogy, and it was called the Lord of the Rings, basically. Well, that's Ralph Bakshi. He's the one that did that. All right, um, and he's also the one that did that adult uh, cartoon film that had nudity and everything in it. Drug use and all this other kind of stuff. Really adult cartoon. It was called Fritz the Cat. He also did that one. So he did Fritz the Cat and Lord of the Rings and a bunch of other ones. And one of the other ones that he did, and this one came out. When did this one come out? It came out in 1977. All right, and it is called Wizards, and it's basically a fantasy film where there's a good wizard and there's a bad wizard, and the good wizard fights the bad wizard, and then everything else is adding to the storyline. But that's the basic premise of the film. Now, I haven't seen the film, but because it's Ralph Bakshi, and I have both Lord of the Rings and Fritz the Cat and the sequel to Fritz the Cat, that I figure, hey, I should pick this one up, see if it's as good as those, and we'll see. Here's the back of it. That's the front. So it's supposed to be a pretty good film. So I'm wondering if it's got kind of like those elements that Heavy Metal. Remember that film? The voice of John Candy, um, that green orb that goes around that tells a whole bunch of different stories. Heavy Metal is the name of the film. Anyway, so I wonder if it has any of those type of elements in it. We'll see when I watch it. All right, next up is a 2001 film, another animated film. It's directed by Richard Linklater, and it's called Waking Life. Now, this one came out in 2001. He did another one like this called A Scanner Darkly, starring Keanu Reeves, and that came out in 2006. And basically, there's a there's a animation technique where you film the film, um, live action film, and then you go back to the film, the actual film itself, and then you redo it as a cartoon. All right, and it's called rotoscoping. Rotoscoping. Now, they used to do it by hand. So if you can imagine going back to all the different of the film and then colorizing it so that it looks like a cartoon. That must have been painstaking work, but from my understanding, it's all done by computer now, right? So if you want to get this type of feel to your film, all right, where it's basically live action actors, but then you color over them to make them look like cartoons, but the movements are still, like live action movements. Um, it takes a bit of getting used to when you're watching it. It's kind of surreal, right? And this whole film is surreal. All right, it goes into reality, goes out of reality. Um, I haven't seen it. I have seen A Scanner Darkly, and I really enjoy A Scanner Darkly. So I thought maybe this one, which has a better reputation than A Scanner Darkly, might be better. So it's probably a kind of a weird reality, non-reality type of film, and we'll see how it is when I watch it. I collect Linklater films, so that one's being added to my collection. All right, next up is a 1996 film starring one of Canada's funniest comedy actors, or two of them actually, Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy. They've been in so many films, and they're in this film together. Christopher Guest made this film, and he's famous for his mockumentary style. He did a bunch of mockumentaries like Best in Show, A Mighty Wind, and this one here. Um, Now, the first ever film that I saw directed by Christopher Guest was Best in Show, and that one, it's I don't know how to describe that film. It's like it kind of grows on you. It's like it's like a mockumentary basically on the the dog show craze that hit the United States at one time. Still going on, where purebred dogs go out for shows and win ribbons and stuff like that. Um, so it kind of makes fun of that in a mockumentary style. Like a mockumentary like The Office or Modern Family, where it's it makes it seem like you're watching a documentary, but it's satire or it's just humorous, right? So Christopher Guest is famous for that type of film, and this is one of his better ones. This one is about him directing uh, a documentary on a small town's 150th anniversary, and if it's got Eugene Levy in it and it's got Catherine O'Hara and a bunch of others, it should be pretty funny. Um, so I picked it up, and it's in one of these snapper cases. Now the problem with snapper cases, this one isn't in too bad of a shape, but so many of them are not very good shape. So if you do get snapper cases, which you will come across on films, some of the films that you like, all right, especially ones that have come out in the 90s, all right, these were popular back in the 90s, um, and they're not on Blu-ray yet. Some of them may be in snapper cases, so you should protect them in plastic uh, because the it gets scraped up, it gets damaged, it dries out, it cracks, it falls off the plastic that it's attached to and everything else. So it's good to protect it. All right. So next up is one of Hitchcock's most famous films from 1951, and it's about murder, and it's called Strangers on a Train. All right. And this film um, is basically how can you get away with murder? What's the perfect murder? And if you know anything about murder, or you talk to police officers or whatever, the easiest murder to solve is a murder of passion from a loved one or somebody that's involved in your life, right? Okay, so those are the easy ones to catch. But the most difficult ones for the police to investigate and catch is random killings, from like you know uh, a person that doesn't know you and you get killed, some random shooting or whatever, right? So if there's no motive to the crime, it's very difficult to find the killer, right? So this film is kind of based on that, where a psychopath who wants to kill somebody meets up with another person on a train who also indicated that they want to, maybe it was out of anger, but they're not. I don't know if they're being serious or not. Um, I can't remember exactly what the second guy. Anyways, so the one guy wants to murder somebody, and the other person wants to murder somebody else. So what they do is they switch their murders, right? So the so it ends up being a stranger who kills that person, right? And it's so difficult to find the killer if the killer doesn't know the person that he kills, right? And it's a rare type of murder. So, but I think there's a resolution at the end of this, if I remember correctly. But it's one of Hitchcock's best films. Um, Came out in 1951. It's called Strangers on a Train. All right. Next up is a Steven Soderbergh film from 2017. It's called Logan's Lucky, and it stars Mr. James Bond himself. All right, and others. Okay, but this is about. It's like a bank robbery comedy type of thing, where these bumbling idiots try to rob a bank, which is almost rote. There's so many films that are that way, right? Bank robberies are very popular in film. And then you got the bumbling bank robbers. This is one of those type of films. And I haven't seen the film. Main reason why I picked it up is I like Steven Soderbergh films, so I picked up this one. Let's see if I like it by watching it. I wanted to add it to my collection because when you collect a director, you want to get all of his films, right? All right, so here's another snapper case, and this is from 1979. This film, and it's called Being There, and it stars Peter Sellers and Shirley MacLaine. Yeah, Shirley MacLaine. So Peter Sellers, uh, Inspector Clouseau, the Pink Panther fame. This one he did after most of those films, but he played a gardener in this one, and he's like the stupidest man on the planet. But because he's quiet and he only speaks about gardening, people mistake him almost as being a savant, right? So he ends up losing his job as a gardener for this upper class rich couple, and he ends up on the street and he ends up bumping into another rich couple, and he tells that person his name, and they mistake him for what a rich family or whatever, coming from a rich family. And the guy that he bumps into is like one of the advisors to the president of the United States. So he ends up being pulled into that world, and he ends up like one of the stupidest men on the planet, ends up becoming an advisor to the president of the United States. It's one of the great satires over the last like 75 years of film. This is one of the greats, and Peter Sellers does this better than anybody else in the history of film. All right, plays the dumb guy better than anybody I've ever seen. All right, I mean, Mr. Bean maybe is up there with Peter Sellers, but like Rowan Atkinson. But no, I think Peter Sellers is better. So, uh, if you like Peter Sellers, if you like the Pink Panther films, then you really are going to enjoy this one. This one is an extremely good film, and it's in a snapper case again, but it's in really good shape. So I'm going to try to keep it that way. Oh, and it's directed by Hal Ashby. I didn't say anything about that, did I? All right. Next up is a 1974 film, and everybody knows this film, right? Once I show it to you, Death Wish from 1974. Charles Bronson, probably his most known film. Well, maybe Once Upon a Time in the West. Probably got his name out there, and but these films are the ones that put Charles Bronson on the map. And the first one is good. The second one is okay. It goes up to 5 films. It spawned like 5 sequels. Uh, and it's directed by Michael Winner. I think he did the first 3 of them, but the first 2 are the ones you want to watch, especially this one. And this one is about, so he plays, I think his name is Paul Kersey. Kersey is his last name. I think Paul is his first name. And he's an architect. And he's at work, and his wife and his daughter, teenage daughter, go shopping at the grocery store. And they pick up a bunch of groceries, but they don't bring them with her. They have it delivered. And so these hoodlums who are at the grocery store pretend to be the grocery delivery guys, and so they open the door, and then they come in and they basically attack and assault the wife and girl, and I think they die in it. Yeah, I think he becomes a widower and a fatherless father because of those. So he hunts those guys down. He loses it, picks up a gun, learns how to shoot or whatever, and he becomes a vigilante on the streets of New York City to clean it up of all the scum, right? And it's basically a revenge film, right? And but he just continues doing it for 5 more films, just killing these bad guys over and over, right? So um, it's one of my favorite Charles Bronson films, but probably my all-time favorite Charles Bronson film isn't Death Wish. It's a film that stars Donald Pleasance, and it's called Telephone with an F, Telefon, and it's basically the story. I don't know if he's American or he's Russian, Pleasance, anyways, but he starts activating sleeper agents in the United States that the Russians put in place after World War II, all right, during the Cold War. And like 30 years later, this guy gets a book on all these um, sleeper agents who don't even know that they're Russian agents. They think they're American because they're brainwashed. But if you say this poem, don't quote me, but I think it's a Robert Frost poem, but I could be wrong. It might be a Walt Whitman poem, but one of the lines in it is "Many miles before I sleep." Maybe you can tell me. That's all I remember from the poem. But he picks up the phone and he has all the list of all the agents and their phone numbers, and he starts calling them up. and activating them, and they're brainwashed to do a job where they go blow up a power plant or a nuclear power plant or some sort of important infrastructure all around the United States. Now, of course, this infrastructure since World War II has been closed down, a lot of it, or moved or whatever. So they end up going blowing up these random places that the police can't figure out why they're doing it, right? But then some of them are still in the place that they were in the 40s, and those one anyway. So the CIA or whoever ends up calling in Charles Bronson to go track that guy down and kill him before he sets off all of these agents, right? And get that book, all right? But this basically is a revenge film. The guy loses his wife and daughter and decides he isn't going to sit there and cry. So he picks up a gun and he starts going to kill bad guys, all right? And it's one of the seminal films of the 1970s. All right, so that is, I think, yes, that is all 25 of the DVDs. Now let's move on to the Blu-rays quickly. Don't want to make this video too long, all right? And my voice is still good. So next up is a 2015 film, all right, directed by Noah Baumbach, and it stars Greta Gerwig and Lola Kirk, and it's basically called Mistress America. And I picked this film up on reputation that it's supposed to be an extremely good film, all right? I don't know a lot other than that. Um, it's about these two girls that end up getting involved with each other. Um, but after that, I don't know much about it. All I know is when I looked it up, everybody said that this was a very good film. So I'll figure. See, this is how you end up expanding your collection and bringing in new directors that maybe you don't know much about. So Noah Baumbach, all right, I don't know a lot about him. So, but this film is supposed to be pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch it, and if I like it, I'm going to search out another one of his films or look him up to see what films he's done. Maybe I know some of the films, all right, um, and watch those. And if I come across, if I like this one, then the next film I watch, I like it as well. Then I'll add him to my collection. I'll start collecting his films and watching his films as well. That's how you expand your collection, get to know more directors and more actors and so on and so forth. All right, so next up, this film I already have because it's directed by Edward Zwick and it stars Daniel Craig, and it's called Defiance. All right, I have this on DVD, so the guy had it in his collection on Blu-ray, so I figured I'll get the Blu-ray. Then I'll have the DVD, the Blu-ray. I'll combine it, take the DVD off the shelf, put the DVD in here, get rid of that case, and only have this thinner Blu-ray case, but still have the Blu-ray and the DVD, right? Because I watch the DVDs on my laptop and I watch the Blu-rays on my in my Blu-ray player. But anyway, so I like to have both of them. So this stars Daniel Craig and Liev Schreiber. Schreiber is his name. You know, he played Wolverine's brother in those Wolverine films with Hugh Jackman. Um, anyway, and he also played, what was that show on TV? Can't remember. I watched the first season of it, and that was it. Anyway, so there's these four Polish Jewish brothers during World War II, and back in 1941, and so they get the hell out of Warsaw, I think it is, or wherever they were, and they escape into the mountains, and while in the mountains, all right, they form a group, and what they do is they do raids on German concentration camp and get the people out of there, and they basically create kind of like an army of all these Jews in Poland, and they fight and protect the ones that can't fight in the forests in Poland, right? So it's a pretty powerful film, and I've seen it on DVD, but I haven't seen it on Blu-ray. So now that I have it on Blu-ray, maybe I'll watch it on Blu-ray as well. Um, but it's by Edward Zwick, who I collect, right? So next up is a John Waters film starring Johnny Depp. It's called Crybaby, and this is supposed to be a pretty good, like teen musical, romantic comedy type of film. And it stars Johnny Depp, and it stars none other than Tracy Lords. All right, and I don't know if you know who Tracy Lords is, but she made her name, you know, in the adult industry and there was a big, huge stink about that because she was in that industry, underage, at the age of 15 or whatever, right? And so there was hell to pay for that, and all of her films were pulled off the shelves, and you don't see them anymore, right? Because you can't be showing underage women in that type of film, right? So here she's not underage anymore; she's an adult, right? And she stars in this film with Johnny Depp, and there's others in it as well. Now John Waters, you know, he's one of the great cult cinema guys from the 1960s, 1970s. He's the one that did was it Hairspray? Hairspray. He did Hairspray, if I remember correctly, as well, right? So um, I collect Waters films, but you don't find them around much, except for Hairspray. You can find it everywhere. Um, but he had this one on Blu-ray, so I picked it up. All right. Next up is a film that I picked up on Reputation alone, and because Tommy Lee Jones is the director, and I don't collect Tommy Lee Jones directed films, but this one is an exception. It's called The Homesman, and basically it's a western where and it also stars Hilary Swank. Remember Hilary Swank from Boys Don't Cry and Million Dollar Baby? That Hilary Swank. Um, she's a woman in this, and she's on her wagon, and she's going past a tree, and there's a Tommy Lee Jones is in the tree with a rope wrapped around his neck and a horse underneath him, and for some reason he's not dead or something. Anyways, so she makes a deal with him that if he helps her bring these three crazy women whose husbands have left them across the state to this other place, she'll cut him free. And so he makes that promise, and then he helps the four women get across the land where there's Indians and everything else, right? So um, it's supposed to be a very good film, like one of the great films of post 2010, the decade that just passed. It's supposed to be one of the great Hollywood films of that decade. So I figure I should watch it, even though I don't really collect Tommy Lee Jones films, right? So, um, but like I said, I'll make an exception and see how that film is. All right. Next up is the Iger Sanction, which is directed by and stars Clint Eastwood. And this is basically, it's kind of like Cliffhanger before Cliffhanger, all right? Because it came out in 1975. So maybe Cliffhanger is maybe Stallone saw the Iger Sanction and decided to make Cliffhanger, make it more into an action film rather than a spy slash murder film. But basically, um, Clint Eastwood is a retired spy, retired. I think he's a spy. This is an action thriller. Yeah, he's a professional retired assassin for the CIA, maybe. Anyway, so um, he goes. So the Eiger and the Eiger Sanction is a mountain in the Swiss Alps, if I remember correctly. Yeah, in the Swiss Alps. So he goes there pretending to be a mountain climber because he is a mountain climber as well as an assassin. All right, and he's going there to search for a murderer who killed a CIA agent, and he's got to go there and figure out who it is. And then by the time he figures out who it is, he's up the mountain with this guy on the side of the mountain on ropes and pulleys and everything, right? So, anyways, it's quite a thriller. It's a very good film. Clint Eastwood has done better films, but this is one of the good ones. All right, not one of the great ones, but one of the good ones, and um, it's worth a watch. And I found it. I have it on DVD now. I have it on Blu-ray, so I'll combine those two. All right, and then there's this one part of the Marvel universe. So this is the first Spider-Man film in the Marvel universe, and I picked this one up because there was a trilogy that they put out on Blu-ray, and this is and I picked it up at either a pawn shop or a thrift store, and I did the thing that you should never do when you pick up movies at a thrift store. I didn't check inside the case, and when I opened up the case, one of the three Spider-Man films was missing. So it has all three of the Spider-Man films on it, right? But one of them was missing. So when I found this, and I got this for like $1 or whatever off the guy. I picked it up so I can add it to that other one. And then this Blu-ray will just be an empty Blu-ray or whatever, right? So, um, and it's pretty good. The Spider-Man trilogy, the Marvel Universe Spider-Man trilogy, is pretty good. This is the first one where he fights Michael Keaton as the Vulture. Um, it's pretty intense, some parts of it. So uh, it's worth a watch if you haven't seen it. All right. And next up, the last of the Blu-rays is a Blu-ray from Disney, and it's the Lilo and Stitch Blu-ray. Now, it's funny though because it's in a DVD sized case because it's a DVD Blu-ray, right? So here it is without the slip cover. All right, 2 disc, 3 disc special edition includes the DVD and the Blu-ray and the Lilo and Stitch 2 film. All right, so yeah, it's a stacking disc. So on this side is that advertisement um, and the digital code or whatever. So I don't know if the digital code still works, but I'm gonna I'll show it to you again. I'll probably like clip that section so that you didn't see the digital code for it because I don't think I should really publish digital codes, right? All right, so that's the front and that's the back. Anyways, it's stacked. There's 3 discs stacked. So you got Lilo and Stitch. You got Lilo and Stitch on Blu-ray. Problem with putting these together is they're stuck. So yeah, the DVD is still perfect. Then you got Lilo and Stitch on DVD, and then you got Lilo and Stitch 2 on DVD. All right. So I don't have Lilo and Stitch 2 on Blu-ray. If I find it on Blu-ray, I'll just take it out of its um, Blu-ray case and put it in with this one. That way, it only has one. But I'm assuming this was the transition time between DVD to Blu-ray, and people were less interested in Blu-ray than they were in DVD. So when they were coming out with this, they put it in a DVD-sized case rather than a Blu-ray case. So it's kind of interesting. It's actually a Blu-ray, all right, DVD combo, but the combo in a DVD case rather than in a Blu-ray case. So I'll probably, if I ever find this in an actual Blu-ray case, I'll, I'll flip them over because this is a lot thicker. But it has a slip cover, so this one is going in. Let's see if it fits. Might need a bigger one because the DVDs will fit, but when you put them in a plastic bag, I mean, but when you put them in these are 6x9 plastic bags. All right. Um, when you have a DVD, but then you have a slip cover over it, it ends up becoming too thick and you have to use a bigger bag. So, anyways, you've probably seen Lilo and Stitch. Stitch is from outer space, and he comes down, and he ends up befriending Lilo, the girl. Anyways, it's a typical Disney movie. Now I have it on Blu-ray. All right, so those are the 7 Blu-rays. Now we'll move into the Steelbook. So the one Steelbook I got is Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven, starring Orlando Bloom, about the Second Crusade, and he goes out and fights. Um, it's a DVD. It's not a Blu-ray in a DVD case, but this one is called the Definitive Edition. All right, and it has 4 discs. All right, you have disc 1, which is the director's cut, and disc 2, which is also the director's cut. So the film is long enough that they needed 2 DVDs to put the director's cut. And number 3 and number 4 is the Path to Redemption, part 1 and part 2. And I'm not sure what the Path to Redemption is. It's probably a documentary on the film, right? So, and it also has this nice, it's not a super thick booklet. It has a nice booklet to it. Gives you all the different scenes, and it gives you The Director's Cut, A Path to Redemption Part 1, and a little write-up of the films. All right, so this one is a steelbook, and they are extremely difficult to keep in mint condition because they scratch so easily. So if you see, it already has a little one right there. So if you did like this guy and you put all your steelbooks on your shelf without protecting them first, all right, I guess you don't mind scratches and stuff on it because when you put it in, pull it out, it's going to be beside, maybe it's going to be beside other, um, you're going to scratch it. You're going to scratch it easily. When you're adding films and you're moving films around left to right, you're going to scratch the bottom of it crazily. Anyways, it's going to be in rough shape after a few years. So if you're like me, get all the air out. All right. Sorry, I think I hit the microphone. I hope it didn't make it too big of a noise. All right. Put it in like that, and there you go. It's protected in a nice cellophane bag. And it will not scratch now. All right. Now, if you drop it, you're still going to dent it. But at least when you're moving it around on the shelf, it's not going to get all that scratched up stuff that always ends up happening with your steelbooks. All right. All right. So that's the first steelbook. Second steelbook is a 2008 film directed by Geronimo del Toro, the man who brought us Hellboy and Hellboy 2. All right. And of course, Pan's Labyrinth and others. Right. So that's the front. Let me make sure. Yeah, it has a digital copy in it. So we'll flip that over. All right. All right. So that's what the back looks like. And this is a beautiful. I like that. I like that cartoon kind of like comic book feel to that. And then the back as well. It's really nice. It's a really nice steelbook. Blu-ray. All right. And it has the Blu-ray and the DVD. All right. So if you know me, those are my personal favorite issues where you have the Blu-ray and the DVD in a Blu-ray sized um, package rather than a DVD sized package. But this is a steelbook, so it's as thick as, you know, it's as thick as a DVD, so you're not really saving any space. But it has both the Blu-ray and the DVD, so I don't have to go searching out to find the DVD to add it, right? So it's here already, all right? And there's the spine to it. So, and this is going to be extremely difficult to keep in mint condition without get all the air out. And there we go. Looks new. All right. And it's protected. Now, if I put, I'm not going to because this one's going to go in the the Del Toro directors section, and this is going to go into the Ridley Scott section. But if they were beside each other, now they can rub it against each other all they want, and they're never going to scratch each other, right? So that's cool. All right. So now the last one out of all of the films and everything, it is Ben Stiller in Zoolander. Now, have you seen this film? This is a funny film, right? I'm not a big fan of Ben Stiller. I mean, I don't like the Night at the Museum films or much of his other stuff. I do like it where he plays the angry guy in that funny film about superheroes. What was that called? Anyways, that was enjoyable. And this one is enjoyable. It's about the fashion industry, and he plays an idiot, right? Who thinks he's super good looking, all right? And him and Owen Wilson compete against each other. But the leader of this fashion show is actually a spy of some sort, and he brainwashes um, Ben Stiller to go kill a political leader. I think it's the president of Turkey. I can't remember which one. Anyways, it's a funny film, and this is the special edition Blu-ray. It has the headband and the movie ticket extra. But the problem with this is the Steelbook Blu-ray is in nice condition. It's in the package, but the back of the package where you get um, the headband and all that, the extra stuff is in paper. All right, and the guy left it in its plastic wrap. But see that? See how it's bent downwards and everything because he's moving it around. He's not taking care of it. But for a buck or two, a Blu-ray, the special Blu-ray with the extras, hey, why not? And the plastic is it's new. He didn't even open it, right? But the plastic's coming off on the top. So I'm such a stickler that even if I get something that's new, all right, and I'm not going to watch it for a while, right? Maybe I've already seen it numerous times, or maybe I have it on a DVD, all right. I will just leave it and I'll protect the cellophane with a plastic bag. Is that crazy or what? But I'll do it because I want to keep the plastic bag new so that when I take it out of the plastic bag, I mean, I want to keep the original cellophane. If I'm not going to watch this film, I might as well keep it in its new packaging and I'll put another bag over it to protect the cellophane that originally came in. And then if I ever come into some financial difficulty and I need to sell some of my collection or whatever, this will sell for more than it would if it was used, right? New always sells for more than used. So if you pick up something new and you're going to watch it right away, cool, watch it. That's the reason why you bought it. Um, Put it in a plastic bag afterwards, especially if it's a steel book, to protect it. All right, because a used steel book that's in perfect shape is worth a lot more than a scratched or dented steel book. All right. In fact, steelbook collectors are the most picky out of all the collectors of you know of of film, right? Of physical media. They're the most picky out of all of us. Um, they don't like the scratches or the dents because they're paying the extra premium for a movie that they could get for like a fourth of that price or a third of that price, but they want to get the steelbook because it looks so much nicer on the shelf, right? But then they put them all on the shelf without protecting them. But when they come over to your house to buy a steelbook off you, they want to know if it's scratched or dented or whatever, and then if it is, they won't buy it, right? Meanwhile, at home, so many of them have them naked on their shelf, and they're going to get dented and they're going to get scratched if you don't protect them in plastic. So it's kind of funny, um, uh, in that way that they won't buy it unless it looks pristine and new. But once they get it, it's okay, or maybe they just don't realize it. So many people don't realize it, right? So uh, so even when I get something new, if I'm not going to watch it right away, I will put it in a plastic bag to protect the actual cellophane that it's in when I bought it, so that if I ever decide to sell it uh, um, before I watch it, all right, um, I can sell it for a higher price because it's new, right? So just something to think about. Um, Now you may ask me, uh, why would you buy something if you're not going to watch it? And especially, it's so expensive when you buy things new. Why would you buy it new if you're not going to watch it? Well, I may have it on. You can get, like I said, like this is new. All right, it hasn't been opened, although the plastic is coming off of it. This is new, even though it's used, and I got it for like $1 or whatever, right? So, um, but I've already seen this film, and I do have it on uh, on DVD, right? So I could open this up and then put the DVD inside the Steelbook and then save some shelf space, right? Um, but I'm not going to watch it, and if I do, I'm probably going to watch it on the DVD rather than the Blu-ray. Uh, so when I do find things that are, that you're not buying from the store, you're buying from private dealers or at pawn shops or other discount places, you do find stuff that's still in its wrapping and it's still new, right? So even though you bought it for a used price, you can sell it for almost like a new price, right? I mean, you won't be able to sell it for as high as it's being bought from the store or from the let's say the boutique Blu-ray place, because nobody's going to pay the same price that they would if they're buying a Criterion film and you're charging the same price as it is new. They'll just buy it off the Criterion. I mean, they may buy it off you to save the shipping, but they know if they buy it off somebody else, they'll get a lower rate, right? So it's really difficult to sell even new stuff unless you're a store, right? At a new price, you're still going to discount it. But um, if I sell this, I wouldn't sell it for the $2 that I got it for, or the dollar that I got it for. You know, it's a Blu-ray, and Zoolander is a pretty good film, and it's the special edition of it, right? Um, so I probably would sell this for something like maybe $10 or $15, right? So it's good to keep it in good shape. And if this plastic wasn't ripped, I would put it in another plastic bag to protect it, because then when I sell it, I'm not going to, but if I did, because I'm coming into some financial problem or whatever, right? I can sell it for more than I would if it was opened, right? So it's good to keep your things in new shape, even though you have no intention of selling your library. Um, Two things. Number one, you're not going to have that library uh, forever. You're only going to have that library for as long as you live if you don't sell it, right? Um, and then you're going to pass it on to somebody else, right? And if you're going to pass it on to somebody else, two things. If you're passing it on, let's say to your son or your daughter, and they have no interest in this stuff, then they're going to sell it. And if they sell it, wouldn't you want them to get the best price that they could get it for? So protect your media uh, for your offspring. If they're going to sell it, it's kind of part of their inheritance, right? So why not be able to have them sell it for a higher price than if you don't take care of it, right? That's number one. Or number two, you may get into some financial difficulty, like I said, or maybe you're going on to collect something else. Maybe you're bored with movies. You've watched enough of them now, and now you want to get into books, or maybe even like sports cards or comics, or something else, right? So you start selling off your collection in order to make room for your new collection, right? And you'll get a lot more money if your stuff looks new or is new, still in its packaging, um, than you will if it's used and damaged or whatever, or not looking very good, right? So either way, your collection is going to be in other people's hands at some point in your life or after your life is finished, right? So why not protect it and keep it in really nice condition? All right. So that's the last one, Zoolander. It's a funny film. It's one of my favorite Ben Stiller films. I think I might. What was it called? Something Men, right? What was that? Miracle Men? No, the one where he plays a superhero and W.H. Macy plays, the superhero that uses a shovel. What the hell? It was such a funny movie. He's like Ben Stiller's like the angry man. Uh, it's something Men, isn't it? I can't remember. I'll have to look it up when I get off this with you, which will happen now. All right. So I've taken up too much of your time already, I think. If you've stuck around to the end of this film, thank you very much. And if you uh, if you liked it, just leave a thumbs up. If you want to join me in this journey that I'm having, see all the media that I'm collecting. It's fun to watch. I watch people on YouTube all the time about the stuff that they're collecting as well, and it's fun. It's like a community, right? So if you want to join, um, click the subscribe button and join me on the journey. And again, thank you very much for watching this video and following me on YouTube if you decide to. All right, and I'll have another video soon.